Lan's attention was fixed on Lu Shang and his eyes widened with curiosity. His device for calculating strength showed that Lu Shang had a stellar combat value of 135 points, but he was still level 9. Lan wondered since when the Crimson Eye Star Pirate Gang had members of this level, which made him assume he must be a newcomer. With eyes shining with rage and his body surrounded by golden martial energy, Lu Shang tightly clenched his fists and began to stare silently at Lan. Lu Shang, focused and surrounded by flames, shot towards Lan, ready to attack. Seeing this, Lan activated his power, making blue martial energy appear around his body. Lan began to touch his mask and an excited smile spread across his face upon noticing that Lu Shang's combat value had already surpassed 1,000 points. It seemed to him an incredibly interesting fact that someone of only level 9 could reach this amount of star power. With this, it no longer surprised him at all that Crimson Eye had recruited him. Lu Shang, surrounded by fire, began to advance quickly toward Lan, ready to finish him off. Lan stood still and began to observe in silence. Several seconds later, his eyes widened in surprise, leaving him in shock. He couldn't believe that Lu Shang's combat value had surpassed 10,000. And to his greatest astonishment, he noticed that the figure kept increasing the closer our boy got. The device continued calculating Lu Shang's combat value. It went from 10,000 to 40,000, leaving Lan speechless. Several seconds later, it reached 50,000 and not long after, Lan's mask began to crack as Lu Shang's combat value had already surpassed 90,000 star points. Lan's mask began to break into pieces, revealing his true face. He had a scar on his eye. His attention was fixed on Lu Shang and his mind was filled with confusion and surprise. He didn't know what was happening or who he was. The device that was calculating Lu Shang's strength started malfunctioning and several windows appeared reporting that the system was failing. At that moment, Lu Shang appeared in front of Lan and with eyes shining with rage, began to stare at him intently with a murderous gaze and prepared to attack. Lan raised his head and upon seeing this, could not help but panic, knowing that this was not good. With an angry expression, he could not help but wonder what kind of joke this was. He could not believe that someone had a power that exceeded the evaluation limit, having surpassed 10,000 points while only being level 9. This seemed simply absurd to him. Lu Shang jumped and concentrated his energy. With eyes shining, he decided to use the ancient fist technique from the 5th era called Heavenly and Earthly Furnace, making a powerful burning sun appear behind him. Lan was paralyzed with fear since he had never seen such a powerful technique before. Lu Shang's eyes began to shine with rage. Lan had broken his spaceship and now had to pay him. Not long after, Lu Shang's body transformed into a powerful fire phoenix, which began to flap its wings and roar. Lan's attention was fixed on it and his mind filled with surprise. He decided not to stand idly by, and while his body was releasing martial energy, he began to draw his sword. Just before Lu Shang's fist could land the impact, Lan drew his sword and blocked the attack. Lu Shang decided not to hold back and used all his strength, but Lan stood firm and was able to block the attack. The combat was so fierce that a wave of energy began to spread throughout the space. With a gaze full of determination, Lu Shang focused and struck again, making red energy emerge from his body. Using the sword, Lan was able to block the attack. He clenched his teeth and his eyes widened in fear and surprise. He couldn't believe that he needed to use all his strength just to stop him and wondered since when did Star Pirates have such a powerful member. Veins appeared on his face. Lan clenched his teeth and began to gaze toward the ground. According to him, star space parasites had to die. With eyes shining with determination, he began to stare at Lu Shang, extended his hand and began to imbue his energy into the blade of the sword. Then he began to concentrate and the rocks that were floating through outer space began to move. Lan extended his hand and a powerful flash began to emerge from it, and not long after, the rocks began to approach him. Upon seeing this, Lu Shang could not help but clench his teeth tightly and his eyes widened in surprise and fear, knowing that this was not good. The rocks exploded, creating a great explosion of martial energy, which destroyed everything in its path and created a curtain of smoke. Lu Shang emerged from the curtain of smoke and using his feet stopped his moving body. The explosion had been powerful, but Lu Shang did not have a single scratch. With a curious gaze, he began to observe his hands, realizing that this was the power of level 11. He was a true martial warrior, many times stronger than the Star Pirates he had eliminated with a single blow. He was, so far, the most powerful opponent he had encountered. Our boy placed his hand on his chest and his attention focused on Lan, making his eyes begin to shine with excitement. And a smile spread across his face, making it clear that the insult parasite did not matter to him in the slightest. For him, even if Lan were a level 11 warrior, if he broke other people's things without reason, he also had to pay. Lu Shang closed his eyes, extended his hands and concentrated, activating the martial god state. Not long after, a powerful golden flash began to emerge from his body. Lan's eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe that this was the power a level 9 should have. No, for him it was clear that his opponent was a being with an overhuman constitution, and also of an extremely high level. With his body surrounded by martial flames, Lu Shang clenched his fist and began to advance quickly towards Lan. With an expression full of excitement and a smile, he decided it was time to use the form of the martial god. While little by little Lu Shang was getting closer, with a furious expression, Lan tightly grabbed his sword and cursed the star pirates. Both attacked, and their energies clashed with each other, creating a powerful shockwave. The combat was evenly matched. At the same time, somewhere else in the galaxy, a ship made a space jump, and not long after, it began to emerge from a blue portal. Inside the spaceship sat the guide, Lan Cheng. He began to gaze toward the ground and felt relieved to have arrived just in time. He swore to himself that this time, when he returned, he would definitely switch to a level 11 ship. He remembered that the ship agent from star Z34548, YZin, owed him a favor for 82 years that had not yet been repaid, so he assumed he should be able to get a good price. Next to him stood Zhao Lin with his arms behind his back. He remained silent, lost in thought. He began to observe space and mentioned that the law officer of his star zone, White Mist, had not yet arrived, but apparently the officer from Star Zone Yamu was already present. Upon hearing this, a joyful smile spread across Lan Cheng's face, as now Lu Shang was saved. Lan Cheng's ship was traveling at high speed through space. Not long after, a spaceship appeared in front of his ship, his attention fixed on it, and upon observing closely, he noticed that it had the maple leaf insignia. Indeed, it was the law enforcement officer from the Yamu Star Zone. He rested his head on his hand, began to gaze toward the ground and let out a sigh. He realized that this level 12 ship was something he probably could not afford even working all his life, not even counting all the favors he had. With a serene gaze, Zhao Lin mentioned that if he surpassed level 11 and was also chosen as a law officer, he could also have a ship. Then he laughed, adding that maybe his ship could be even more luxurious. Lan Cheng raised his head and a smile spread across his face. For him, this was something even more unlikely than winning the grand prize of the stellar lottery. Just then, something caught their attention, making them freeze in fear. Zhao Lin went into shock, while on the other side, Lan Cheng's eyes widened with confusion and surprise. They were near the area where Lu Shang was. In front of them a powerful purple martial flash appeared. Their attention was fixed on it. Lan Cheng stood up from his seat, not knowing what was happening. Lan Cheng's ship began to shake. His eyes widened in surprise and fear upon realizing that this fluctuation he felt was, in fact, a battle between level 11 experts. The spaceship system began to analyze, and several seconds later, the system began to display a scan in which ship remains could be seen. Realizing that what the scan showed were the remains of the Demon Claw ship from the Crimson Eye Star pirate group. With a serene gaze, Zhao Lin mentioned that the ship had been completely pulverized, and it seemed that the Crimson Eye pirates had really fallen. The combat was fierce, with bodies releasing martial energies. Lan and Lu Shang began to attack each other. Zhao Lin began to observe the battle carefully. He assumed that the person fighting outside, with that silver combat suit, must be the justice officer of the Yamu Star Zone. Lu Shang moved quickly and appeared in front of Lan. Upon seeing this, his eyes widened in surprise. Lan had no time to react. Lu Shang attacked with force, causing Lan's body to be thrown. With a surprised expression, Zhao Lin realized that the golden humanoid figure was not Crimson Eye, but it was incredibly strong. Its power was by no means inferior to that of the justice officer. In fact, it even seemed to be surpassing him. This seemed terrifying and led him to wonder if perhaps he too was a member of the Star Pirates. With eyes shining with determination, Lan began to imbue his power into the sword and decided it was time to put an end to this battle. Just then, Lu Shang appeared in front of him and grabbed him by the head. Upon noticing this, Lan couldn't help but panic. Lu Shang began to attack quickly and gave Lan some fierce punches to the chest. Lan began to scream in agony. Not long after, Lan lost consciousness. His face was full of blood and his eyes turned white. Lu Shang, who was sweating, let out a sigh. With a serious gaze, he turned around and began to observe Lan Cheng's spaceship. Upon seeing this, Lan Cheng's eyes widened in surprise, realizing that he was Lu Shang. With a nervous expression, he slapped himself. Zhao Lin's attention fixed on him. With a curious gaze, he asked what he was doing. Lan Cheng approached Zhao Lin, grabbed his hand and asked him to give him a really strong slap since he suspected that he was dreaming. Zhao Lin became confused. With a sincere gaze, Lan Cheng began to observe the hands and mentioned that he was going crazy. Zhao Lin began to concentrate his energy in his hand and decided to listen to him. Without wasting any more time, he gave Lan Cheng a strong slap on the face. The blow was so strong that Lan Cheng's body flew off and crashed hard against the wall. With eyes full of tears, Lan Cheng put his hand over his cheek. Zhao Lin waved his hands in denial and with a serious look made it clear that it had been Lan Cheng himself who had asked him to hit him, sincerely admitting that in all his life he had never heard such a request as this one. Lan Cheng cracked his neck and with a furious gaze called Zhao Lin a bastard. He shouted that he had told him to make it strong, but not to use all his strength. To top it off, that scoundrel had even used a level 10 martial technique. He started tapping the spaceship window and decided to forget about it, since he wasn't going to argue over those details. He began pointing at Lu Shang with his finger and with a sincere gaze asked him if he would believe that the person who was fighting against the justice officer was, in fact, Lu Shang. Upon hearing this, Zhao Lin's eyes widened in surprise and fear, leaving him in shock. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.